Hello. Imagine this. In the distant future, humans live in a computer-aided society and have forgotten the fundamentals of mathematics, including even the rudimentary skill of counting. Arithmetic has all but become a lost art. That is, until the events of the story. Imagine the powerful feeling of knowing how to calculate with a pencil and paper, a simple skill children learn in school today, and what you could do with it. I'm talking about the short story The Feeling of Power, written by Asimov. The short story first appeared in the February 1958 issue of If, Worlds of Science Fiction, and was reprinted a few other times, most recently in the 1986 collection, Robo Dreams. As usual, my plot summary and review are filled with story spoilers. If you would rather read the short story first and avoid spoilers, a link is provided in the description. The story goes as follows. In a place called New Pentagon, Jihan Schumann, a computer expert of the highest degree, introduces select members of the terrestrial military and Congress to a lowly technician by the name of Myron Obb. This man, Schumann claims, has made a revolutionary discovery. He sets Obb to stand in front of this highly dignified man and show them his groundbreaking findings. Obb proceeds to multiply numbers on a piece of paper. These esteemed generals and politicians are not only dumbfounded, but also skeptical. What is this? A parlor trick? Is this man a mere illusionist? But as Obb continues to perform miracles, simple arithmetic, with his pen and paper, they compare his answers to the calculations of their computers, and the results are always right. For this reason, they are completely blown away. Obb explains that he discovered how to reverse engineer the principles of pencil and paper arithmetic by studying the workings of ancient computers, which were programmed by human beings before bootstrapping became the norm. The issue is taken for the consideration of the president of the Terrestrial Federation himself. It turns out the Federation is at war against Deneb, and the war is conducted by long-range weapons controlled by super-powerful computers. Both the Denebians and the Terrans have equal forces and technology, so the war is at a dangerous deadlock. At first, they consider that this new development, even though it's of no practical use now, has the potential to make a difference in the war by providing something extra, which the Denebian computers are not predicting. Soon, however, the uses of this development, which is later dubbed graphitics, acquire an even more sinister tone. You see, computers are expensive and hard to replace, and they take a lot of space and weight in a spaceship. What if Terrans could replace electronic computers with human calculation? And why stop there? They could build cheaper missiles with living people manning them and personally guiding the missiles to their targets themselves. After all, while computers are costly, humans are expendable, aren't they? Finally, a government project, Project Number, starts in order to develop graphitics to its full potential. Obb, no longer a lowly technician, now has a fancy title and considerable upgrade in pay. He realizes what he's done and regrets his creation. Obb is so upset by the appropriation of his discovery for military purposes that he commits suicide. As Obb's funeral proceeds, his supervisor realizes that even with Obb dead, the advancement of graphitics is unstoppable. He executes simple multiplications in his mind without help from any machine, which gives him a great feeling of power. Sometimes what one man considers a step backward, another one may consider a leap forward. The story is representative of the genre of sci-fi that started in the 1950s as a reaction to computers around the theme of caution against human mental atrophy in the computer era. In a similar vein is the short story Into the Comet, written by British writer Arthur C. Clarke, and which was originally published in the October 1960 issue of the literary magazine Fantasy and Science Fiction. Like The Feeling of Power, Into the Comet is one of the several stories by many science fiction writers in which problems are solved by reverting to primitive technology. The plot concerns a journey by a spaceship to enter through the layers of gas surrounding a comet and observe the nucleus at close range. This part of the mission is successful, but the ship's computer develops a malfunction and they are unable to compute the required orbit to escape the comet. The ionized gas in the comet's tail prevents any radio communication with Earth. In the story, George Pickett, a part Japanese journalist on board the ship, recalls the use of the abacus used by his grandmother and persuades the ship's astronomer to give it a try. Once convinced, the astronomer creates a production line of the crew using abaci to carry out the calculations that the computer would normally do. The procedure is successful and an orbit is calculated to bring the ship within radio range of Earth. Which also reminds me of the classic 1967 Star Trek episode Arena, Season 1, Episode 18, in which Kirk is left stranded on an alien planet and has to fight the alien captain of an enemy starship of a reptilian species known as the Gorn. Trying to stay ahead of the Gorn, Kirk discovers numerous valuable minerals and resources on the planet, seemingly useless at this point. He is inspired upon finding stalks of bamboo and rock chemicals that can be mixed into a black powder formula. He constructs a makeshift weapon using chunks of diamond as ammunition. Kirk lies in wait for the Gorn and fires on him, severely wounding him. As Kirk prepares to deal a death blow, he considers the Gorn's claims that the attack on an Earth colony was only self-defense and allows him to live. Again, what do these stories have in common? They all show a character having to revert to simpler, more primitive technology in order to solve a complex problem. Anyway, back to The Feeling of Power. As is typical of Asimov, the story makes use of ideas the reader is already familiar with, but sheds a new light upon them. The story revolves around a seemingly rather simple premise, which turns out to be much more complex than what it appeared to be. The Feeling of Power shows what you and I would consider a step backward, being taken as a leap forward in the context of the story. So as I said before, at first, when graphitics is presented to the president, they consider that this new development, even though it's of no practical use then, has the potential to make a difference in the war by providing something extra that the Nebian computers are not predicting. Then they consider using this new development to actually replace a ship's computer. That part I found absurd because no human being could execute the astronomical calculations for a studied orbit, for example, in the speed required by spaceflight. But I have to say, Into the Comet provides an interesting and quasi-viable solution several people working in a production line emulating the workings of a computer. And I should add that Into the Comet adds an extra element to increase the story's believability, the abacus. When proficiently used in the highest levels, an abacus can allow a human being to calculate as fast as a machine. This is a genuine Japanese abacus from the turn of the 20th century. The Japanese call it a soroban. You can observe there are carvings in Japanese for the numbers. I believe this was used by a businessman for accounting. You know, money spent, money earned, things like that. Anyway, I like how Asimov changes the tone of the story. It starts with an eccentric man showing a mere curiosity to important people, and the effect is even funny. But soon the story shifts to a darker mood, with the characters considering using this new development for the war, and even to build missiles with kamikaze pilots, because human beings, unlike computers, would be expendable. Finally, the outcome makes perfect sense with this shift in tone. The inventor, disappointed with how his invention is being used, takes his own life. And all of that is crowned by the great irony. The inventor's suicide is of no consequence, because now the invention has a life of its own. A chilling thought. Well, that's it for now. Please make sure you give this video a like or a dislike if you really have to. And don't forget you can make a comment, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Next video will be seeing some of the impact a few ideas in the story have on the current world. Don't miss that. See you all then.